There's something quietly powerful about a woman who doesn't chase after the one who left. Something magnetic about the one who chooses growth over grudges, peace over proving a point. When someone walks away from you, the natural instinct is to question your worth, to rewind every memory looking for what went wrong. But here's the truth. Them leaving wasn't your ending. It was your ignition. The moment they walked out, they made room for the rise of a version of you they never saw coming, the unforgettable version. The version that doesn't beg to be remembered, but is anyway. If they left you good, now it's time to become the one they can't forget. Let's talk about how. When someone leaves you, especially someone you invested your heart in, it can feel like they took a part of you with them. But the truth is, what they left behind is far more important: your power. The first step to becoming unforgettable is reclaiming your energy. When you were with them, you gave. You gave your time, your love, your attention, your emotional availability, and maybe in all of that giving, you started to lose the core of who you were before they came into your life. It's not that you stopped being you, it's that you handed over pieces of yourself slowly, believing it was the cost of closeness. Now that they've gone, it's time to collect those pieces and call your energy back home. Calling your energy back isn't about pretending they never mattered. It's about consciously deciding that you matter more. It's realizing that the energy you once invested in thinking about them, texting them, wondering how they felt, or deciphering their mixed signals can now be redirected into your own self-evolution. This isn't about ego. It's not about making them jealous or proving a point. It's about shifting the lens from them to you. Because while they were the chapter that closed, you are the entire book. And every page from this moment forward is yours to author with deliberate, intentional power. Start by setting small boundaries with yourself. That urge to check their social media, that's your energy slipping out the door again. The desire to respond to their breadcrumb text or post something just for their attention, that's you giving them the steering wheel of your emotions again. Take it back. Every time you resist that temptation, every time you choose presence over pining, you're reclaiming the power they didn't deserve in the first place. And you'll feel the shift. At first, it might feel like silence and absence, but in that quiet is where the rebuilding begins. You'll notice that you have more mental space. You'll start to dream about your own goals again. Instead of wondering how to fit into theirs, your mood won't be dictated by whether they noticed you today. It'll come from the inside out. The beauty of reclaiming your energy is that it naturally creates a magnetic force. And when you're focused on your own alignment, people feel it. They sense your glow, your groundedness, your mystery. And that's what makes you unforgettable. Not desperation, not proving a point, but standing so firmly in your own presence that others can't help but look twice. They might notice, they might come back, or they might stay silent. But that's not the point anymore. The point is that you're not giving your peace away for someone who treated you like an option. You're not keeping your worth on a shelf labeled pending their validation. You're not waiting for them to wake up and see your value. You're living like it's already undeniable. And it is. You become unforgettable not by chasing, but by choosing to move with grace, choosing to focus on the relationship you have with yourself, choosing to shine in ways you had dimmed when you were trying to fit into their life. The more you call your energy back, the more you show the world and yourself that no one holds the key to your joy but you. That's what makes them remember you. That's what leaves an imprint. Because when someone walks away from a woman who has remembered her power, they don't forget her. They realize too late that she was the rare kind, the kind you don't meet twice. Healing after being left isn't just about time passing. It's about what you do with that time. One of the most powerful things you can do is invest in becoming someone you deeply admire. This isn't about changing who you are to impress anyone, least of all the person who walked away. It's about becoming so aligned with your own sense of purpose, confidence, and self-worth that your life becomes something even you would be inspired by. Because when you're proud of the life you're building, your energy shifts. It becomes magnetic, and suddenly you're not chasing anyone, you're choosing who gets to stand beside you. There's something uniquely powerful about a woman who is no longer waiting for closure, permission, or validation. When you start showing up for your own goals, for your body, your mind, your emotional well-being, everything changes. It could be as small as committing to daily walks, taking that course you've been putting off, or diving back into your passion projects. These things don't just fill your time, they fill your soul. They remind you that your life is bigger than who texted or didn't text you today. They remind you that love can exist within you long before it's reflected back by anyone else. When someone leaves, it's tempting to want to prove something, that you're doing better, that you're thriving, that you didn't need them anyway. But true transformation doesn't scream. It speaks quietly through your consistency, your energy, your unshakable peace. When you're growing, truly growing, it stops being about making them regret leaving and starts being about how grateful you are that they did. Because now you have space to evolve, space to become, space to realize that your story didn't end when they left, it began. You become unforgettable not because you tried to be, but because you step fully into your life. People can feel when you've stopped making them the center of your emotional world. They sense when your validation isn't outsourced anymore. And ironically, it's in that moment, when you've outgrown needing their attention, that they often start paying attention. But by then, you're not the same person. The version of you they knew was still figuring herself out. This version, she's rising. She's busy becoming someone her past self would look at and say, "That's who I was always meant to be." The best part of becoming someone you admire is that it doesn't depend on anyone else's input. No one else has to choose you. No one else has to recognize your worth. You're doing this because you've decided that your life matters too much to keep living it on pause. You've decided that your happiness can no longer hinge on someone else's inconsistency. And when you make that decision, you take your power back. That kind of power. It's unforgettable. It's magnetic. It's what people remember long after they've walked away. And it's what creates a life so full, so rich, that whether or not they come back becomes irrelevant. Because you'll already be too busy becoming the woman they never imagined you could be, the one they'll never be able to forget. There is something undeniably powerful about peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything going your way, but the kind that lives inside you even when your world has shifted. When someone leaves you, there's a storm that brews. Questions, regrets, anger, longing. But amid that chaos, there's also a doorway to something quieter and infinitely more magnetic. The energy of stillness, of self-control, of choosing not to react, not to beg, not to chase. That calm isn't weakness, it's self-mastery. And that mastery leaves an impression that lingers in ways words never could. When someone walks away, they often expect noise. They expect you to blow up their phone, to question everything, to break down. And many times, that's what they're used to. Because that's what ego does. Ego wants to know it still matters. But when you don't give them that, when you maintain your silence, not out of pride, but out of strength, that silence becomes deafening. Your absence becomes louder than any words you could have spoken. You don't have to say, "I'm better without you." The way you carry yourself says it for you. There's something that happens when you resist the urge to prove your worth. You reclaim your energy. Instead of trying to convince someone of how valuable you are, you conserve that energy and invest it in yourself. You put it into your routine, your goals, your glow up. You redirect it into your friendships, your passions, your healing. And suddenly, you're not waiting for them to notice you. You realizing you don't need them to, because now you're seeing your life through a lens that isn't clouded by heartbreak. You're seeing who you are when you're not trying to earn someone's love. And that's the version of you that becomes unforgettable. Men remember the woman who didn't break her dignity to chase them. Not because she didn't feel pain, she did, but she honored herself more than she indulged her desperation. She chose not to act out of fear of being alone. And in doing that, she set a boundary without ever speaking a word. That kind of restraint is rare. And what's rare is what stays on someone's mind. It might not hit him immediately, but over time, it will. When he scrolls past something that reminds him of you, when someone new doesn't respond with the same grace, or isn't as calm in chaos, that's when it starts to echo. Your composure, your warmth, your poise. It's a myth that being remembered means making noise. Sometimes the deepest impression comes from what you don't say, from how you didn't collapse, from how you rose quietly, because people can feel when someone is unbothered, not because they're numb, but because they've grown. They've shifted from needing validation to offering it to themselves. That shift changes everything. It makes your presence a privilege, not a given. It makes your attention something that can't be won back with charm or apologies. It has to be earned through consistency and respect. And while the world may glamorize loud revenge or dramatic comebacks, the truth is nothing is more impactful than peace. Peace speaks. It says, I know my worth. It says, you don't get to shatter me and still have access to me. It says, I've moved on, not just from you, but from the version of me that thought you were the prize. That kind of inner stillness changes the game, it shifts the dynamic, and it leaves behind something far stronger than bitterness. It leaves behind a legacy of grace, one that lingers in their memory, not because you fought to stay there, but because you evolved into someone unforgettable without them. There's a very specific kind of power in not trying to convince someone of your worth. When someone walks away from you or chooses someone else, the instinct is often to wonder, what could I have done differently? It's human to search for explanations. But the truth is, every time you start bending over backwards to prove to someone that you were good enough, you slowly start walking away from yourself. You move further and further from the person you were before they made you question your value. And that's not how you become unforgettable. You become unforgettable the moment you stop explaining your worth and start embodying it. People feel energy more than they listen to words. You can say, I'm worth loving all day long, but if your actions reflect insecurity or desperation, that message doesn't land. When someone leaves you, they're essentially saying, I don't choose you. And if you start chasing them, you reinforce the idea that your value is tied to their approval. But when you stop chasing and instead start rebuilding from within, something else happens. You shift the dynamic. You take the power out of their hands and reclaim it. Not because you want them to feel the loss, but because you're finally seeing that you don't need to be chosen by someone who couldn't see your value to begin with. The woman who becomes unforgettable is the one who doesn't make someone else's choice about her. She doesn't internalize rejection as a verdict. She sees it as redirection. She knows that someone leaving isn't a sign she lacks something, but a sign that they lack the depth to appreciate it. That kind of clarity changes everything. It shifts the energy. Instead of leaning in and trying to salvage something, she leans back into herself. She doesn't beg, she doesn't defend, she doesn't over-explain. She simply refocuses. And that quiet detachment, that unwavering self-belief, that's what leaves a mark. Men don't forget the woman who made them question their own decisions. The woman who didn't fight to prove she was worthy of love, but chose instead to love herself harder in the face of loss. Because that's rare. That's strength most people don't expect, especially when they're used to games or guilt or emotional reactions. When she offers none of that, when she gives them nothing to push against, it forces them to sit with their own discomfort, their own regret. And eventually they start to see her not through the lens of ego or assumption, but through the mirror she held up by walking away with grace. There's a kind of freedom in not needing closure from the person who hurt you. Because the truth is, closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your own decision to stop needing it. When you stop asking, why wasn't I enough, and instead start saying, I am enough, whether they see it or not, you begin to heal. Not in a way that's loud or performative, but in a way that's rooted, steady, unshakable. And that's the version of you they'll remember. The one who didn't crumble, who didn't collapse, but who rose without needing to be rescued. When you carry yourself with quiet dignity, when you let your absence speak louder than your presence ever had to, when you evolve instead of explaining, you make a lasting impact. You don't become unforgettable by being the loudest voice in the room. You become unforgettable by being the one who didn't try to earn a place, but who walked away knowing that her value was never up for negotiation. And that difference, that shift, is what changes the narrative. It's what turns the pain of being left into the power of becoming the one they never stop thinking about. There is something magnetic about a person who no longer seeks validation from the one who let them go. It's a quiet kind of confidence that doesn't announce itself, but is felt the moment you walk into a room. When someone leaves you or chooses another path, it's easy to feel like you've been erased, like your presence was replaceable. But the truth is, what they leave behind isn't someone broken. What they leave behind is someone in the process of becoming untouchably whole. And there's nothing more unforgettable than that. The mistake most people make is thinking that revenge or jealousy is what makes someone realize what they lost. But real power doesn't come from making them feel bad. It comes from making them feel your absence. Not in a spiteful way, not through games, but in the undeniable sense that you've moved on. Not just physically, but emotionally. When you no longer react, when you no longer orbit around their choices, you create a void that their ego wasn't expecting. That silence is louder than any confrontation ever could be. People don't expect you to thrive without them, especially if they assumed you were attached, emotionally invested, or willing to shrink to keep them around. When you detach, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity, you interrupt their narrative. You stop being the one who clings to the doorframe of a relationship that's already closed. And you become the one who builds a new life without waiting for the apology or the recognition that may never come. They feel that difference. Not immediately, maybe. Sometimes people take time to understand the consequences of their choices, but they always circle back to the memory of someone who stood in their truth, without drama, without blame, and walked away with elegance. Because most people expect messiness. They expect pain to manifest as chaos. When you respond with peace instead of pursuit, it throws them off balance. That's where the power lies. Not in trying to make them pay, but in choosing not to. You stop being a chapter they skim through and become the paragraph they keep rereading, wondering how they missed the meaning the first time. That happens when you elevate. When you no longer revolve around their attention and start glowing from within. That's the glow that doesn't come from makeup or curated social media posts. It's the one that radiates from someone who knows they were always enough, even when someone else failed to see it. It's not about pretending you're over it. It's not about denial. It's about acceptance. It's about choosing your peace over your pride. It's about waking up and deciding that their departure doesn't define your story. And when you make that decision, when you fully own that the best closure is building a better life, you shift everything. You no longer need them to see your worth because you're too busy living it. Eventually, the energy you stop giving them starts to echo in their world. They start to notice the silence, the distance, the version of you that no longer checks in, no longer wonders, no longer waits. And in that space, they're left to confront a truth they didn't expect. That losing you wasn't just walking away from someone good. It was walking away from someone rare. That's the real karma, not the downfall they might face, but the realization that while they were unsure, you were busy becoming unforgettable, not by trying to win them back, but by finally choosing yourself. That's what stays with them. That's what lingers. That's what they remember when the noise settles and they realize that the one they let go was the one who didn't just move on, but moved up. When someone leaves you, there's a deep temptation to prove your worth immediately, to show them what they missed, to post the right photo, say the perfect thing, or somehow demonstrate you're doing just fine without them. But the truth is, the most unforgettable people aren't those who rush to prove anything. They're the ones who quietly grow. They're the ones who disappear for a while. Not to be dramatic, but because they're busy building, healing, becoming. And it's that kind of transformation that becomes impossible to forget. See, when someone leaves you, they often expect you to stay stuck in a cycle of pain and confusion. They subconsciously assume that your world was orbiting them. So when you take that pain and you transmute it into purpose, when you use that space not to chase them, but to challenge yourself, that's when you become truly powerful. There's something magnetic about someone who goes inward, who doesn't flail or cling or react, but who retreats with grace and comes back with fire in their eyes. They don't expect you to evolve. They don't expect you to get stronger, happier, more peaceful. But when you do, it speaks louder than any "look at me now" post ever could. Because it's not performative. It's not rooted in insecurity. It's the natural result of choosing yourself day after day, even when your heart is still aching. That kind of growth, it radiates. It shows up in your eyes, in the way you speak, in the way you walk into rooms without needing to be seen. And here's what happens next. While you're busy becoming, while you're pouring energy into your goals, your friendships, your inner world, he starts to notice. Maybe not at first, maybe he's still distracted or running from his own emotions, but eventually something shifts. He sees a photo of you looking genuinely happy, not forced, not curated. He hears from a mutual friend that you've been glowing lately, or maybe he just feels it. The energetic absence of someone who once cared deeply but doesn't reach out anymore. That's when it hits, not in some dramatic "I made a mistake" moment, but in those quiet realizations, in those flashes of memory, the laughter you shared, the way you understood him, the way you stayed loyal even when things were uncertain. He starts to remember your essence, not through pressure, but through absence. And now, instead of seeing the woman who once longed for his attention, he sees the woman who elevated without it. It's in that contrast that he begins to feel the weight of his decision, because now you're no longer available in the way you used to be. You're no longer checking for him, waiting for his messages, or trying to hold on to what was. You've shifted your energy inward. And energy doesn't lie. People feel it. They feel when they've lost something rare, not because you said it, but because you became it. The most unforgettable version of you is not the one who begs or proves or performs. It's the one who evolves, who chooses herself even through the heartbreak, especially through the heartbreak. That's the version he didn't see coming. That's the one he'll remember, not because you made him, but because you became too powerful to forget. When they left, you may have felt like the story was over, like you had been cast aside in favor of something shinier, newer, or easier. But the truth is, your story was just beginning. Being left didn't define your worth. How you rose afterward did. You didn't chase, you didn't beg, you rebuilt. Piece by piece, moment by moment, you became someone even you couldn't ignore. Not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. That quiet glow of confidence, peace, and power, that's what makes you unforgettable. Because the people who leave often expect to be remembered, but it's the ones who grow in their absence, who rise with grace and strength, that end up etched in their memory forever. Not because they demanded it, but because they earned it. You didn't just survive losing them. You became someone they'll never stop thinking about.